Hello, hello, everyone. I am so happy to bring to you today an experience that I am sure is going to change everybody's life for the better. I, for one, am excited about what is about to happen here because today we're going to be talking with Albert Bramante, Dr. Bramante. I think we're going to all have a great time. We're going to learn from one another. We're going to develop a conversation together. And as I promised him, and as I promise all of you guys, I don't know where this conversation is going. And I like it that way. It's organic, it's spontaneous. Neither him nor I have a pre written agenda. We're going to develop this conversation as we go along. And to me, those are the best conversations to have because they can go anywhere. And so we're both excited to be here today. Dr. Laurent is a successful man, an accomplished man. He has a lot to teach and share with all of us. So I'm excited to bring him to all of you. Let's welcome him and let's have a great time. Thank you, Albert. Thank you for being here. It's really, really awesome of you to take the time. I know you're a busy man. Thank you for being here. Tell us a little bit about you, and then we'll take it from there.
Sure. Well, I also want to thank you for inviting me on the show. I'm really happy to be here. So, I'm Dr. Albert Bramante. I have a PhD in psychology. I also been working with actors for the past 20 years, and I've been I love what I do. I love working with people. I've also worked with actors for many years as well. That kind of happened later in life, kind of by accident, in a sense, a happy accident, of course. But I started out like just my intention was to be a clinical psychologist and to be a full time college professor. That was my goals growing up. And, throughout some experiences, I found myself having an interest in the creative side, show business, performing arts, theater. And so it just became more of a fascination for me to work with actors, to be around theater people. And so that was like pretty much what I did for the first part of my life in a sense. And working, a little bit with actors, I was in a drama club, took some acting classes in college. And it really wasn't until, I was in my 20s, that mid 20s, that I decided, let me see if maybe this acting thing is worth it. Now, I didn't necessarily like being an actor, but I enjoyed being around actors and working with actors. So, what I only really gave the acting thing, profession like maybe 2 years of my time before I realized that, hey, I wanted to do something different.
Got
And
you.
so that's what I did.
Yeah.
And so I became an agent. Hmm.
Oh, that's beautiful. People who have been following me for a while know that you and I have similar or parallel backgrounds. I was also teaching in college for a few years. I taught biomedical engineering. Then I went into hypnotherapy, and the reason for that was because I had a parallel life in mystical philosophy, and I was interested in hypnosis. So that's analogous to you having an interest in academic psychology plus the acting side, right? But
Hmm.
interestingly, I went to London to study theater, and later on, I became a stand up comedian. My daughters, of course, make fun of me because they always say, Papi, you're not funny. They're always, and I don't think I'm funny, but I guess I think I'm funny, but nobody else does. But still, I learned how to do a little bit of comedy, and I just find it, fun to do that. But anyway, so that's a little bit of acting as well. And so Dr. Bramante and I have somewhat analogous backgrounds, and I think that that makes it for a really interesting conversation. And do you mind telling us a little bit about, like, where were you born, whereabouts were you born, and where did you grow up? And I always like to ask people, what was high school like for you? Because I find that those are such important formative years.
Hmm.
So I'm curious, where were you born? Where did you grow up, basically?
So I was born and raised in New Jersey, and that's where I still am. And I, I was a different type of child. So I grew up. I'm the youngest of five, I have, 3 older brothers and 1 older sister, and I I was a different one in my family. And what I mean that is everyone in my family, come from a blue collar family. They were, through and through into sports, athletics. My father was a football coach. My oldest brother, was a football coach and football player, baseball player. For me, I had zero interest in sports,
Mhm,
both playing and even as a spectator.
mhm,
So I was into reading. That was like my sanctuary, and I always liked very deep topics. And so I kind of you asked like my high school life. I had a great, semi great high school, career. I wasn't the most popular. I was not never bullied, thankfully. But I wasn't like the most popular because I was the type of the student that kind of got along better with the teachers, and because I was a little bit older in years wise, so I found myself really identifying more with teachers. And but I was also very much involved in a lot of clubs and organizations, the debate club, the drama club, the Rotary Club, the Kiwanis Club, all these different service organizations. I was a part of that. I think I was like in altogether like almost 10 clubs in high schools. I was very involved. And same thing in college. I was very much involved. But I was, a lot of the books I was reading in high school were about the human mind. Like for example, I read, How to Win Friends and Influence People by Dale Carnegie, or The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, as well as Feeling Good by David Burns, which is a primer on cognitive behavioral therapy. And I think those books kind of like turned me into or onto psychology. And so by the end of my sophomore year in high school, I kind of declared that I was going to be a psych major. And I knew it way early.
Yeah, that's early. Yeah, yeah. Usually, a lot of people don't define what they want to do, quote unquote, when they grow up, right? Until much
Yeah.
later in life. So that's interesting. So by your junior year, you knew you wanted to be in the field of psychology. So of course, like everybody else, you got a bachelor's degree. That's how everybody starts. When did you know that you wanted to go deeper into it and go all the way through your doctorate? How did this? Because that's a big commitment, obviously.
Yeah, no, it's really a big commitment, to go into it, and like I said, I kind of had an inkling in it when I was in, high school that I wanted to have the PhD.
Okay.
That was like my goal. I wanted to become a doctor. At least a PhD. And so when I was in college, I really started to enjoy the research aspect of it. Like the
Mhm.
so I because I think I was an avid reader, I was always classified as a thinker.
Mm.
So I was the type of student that loved doing research papers.
Mm.
Like just researching was so exciting. Like just to research. So like all throughout my my undergrad and grad school, I excelled at like writing papers. That was like my talent. And so I spent, I really, like I said, during my undergrad years, started to do a deep dive. And then, of course, for my master's degree. Now, in my master's degree, I specialized in marriage and family therapy. So I started looking at like Virginia Satir and Milton Erickson and Chloe Madonis and Jay Haley and the people that were pioneers in solution focused short term therapy, um, and became very enthralled in that aspect. Um, Especially the work of like it was just very fascinating because it's considered like non-traditional psychology, Um, and so that kind of started to get me thinking a little bit. I didn't real put two and two together. And then when I started my PhD program, I again was intending to go for clinical psychology, and I finished all my coursework and clinical, but I switched to a more general focused, for two main reasons. One was timing. because right around the time that I finished my coursework, I was hired to be a full time professor at my where I was teaching at the time. And the demands of a full time professorship, even at a community college, I wouldn't have been able to do both because in
Yeah.
order to get a clinical degree, you have to have a practicum, a 750-hour practicum, and a 2,000-hour internship, which is equivalent to about 18 months,
Yeah.
of full time. I didn't
Oh,
have that time, to do that full time. So that would, if anything, I would have had to do that part time, and that would have took me forever, to do. So that was the one reason I said, you know what, I'm going to separate. Also, I became a little bit, um, I still appreciate it, but I became a little disillusioned with the clinical model because it was all about, in my opinion, pathologizing people and creating people in like long term therapy loops that weren't exactly effective. Because I would have professors and some of my colleagues in grad school that were like, "Oh, I've been treating this woman for 8 or 9, or this man for 8 or 9, 10 years," and I thought to myself, "There's got to be a better way." The 8 or 9 or 10 years, and so like you, this is where I discovered like hypnotherapy and NLP. Um, neuro linguistic programming. And that's sort of like where I said, you know what, I really want to study this. And because of the timing and that, I said, you know what, I'm just going to go for a PhD with a specialization with education and research because I love teaching. So in this way, I can get my PhD and just move on. And so that's what I did. I finished my dissertation. Now, while I was going for my PhD, I I was building up my talent agency at the time, and the one thing I kept running into was actors were self-sabotaging, shooting themselves in the foot. I even saw this in students too. So I became very much interested in doing a deep dive in self-sabotage. Why do we do it? And so my dissertation for my PhD was on self-defeating behavior and performing artists.
wow.
And my university loved it at when I presented it to them. So, and it was a passion of mine, and it was a good way of me to bring both of my worlds together. The performing arts, yeah, as well as with the psychology.
Wow, that's fascinating. Let me ask you, um, actors. Actors. I did a little bit, like I told you, I went to London to study theater, and I love acting, and I love the world of theater and the world of acting, like you, as you do as well. And I have always thought, and you correct me if I'm wrong, because I'm not a professional actor, nothing like that. So obviously, my knowledge is very different from your knowledge level because you work with actors, right? So I have always felt that acting is somehow a process whereby we access different parts of ourselves. Would you, as a psychologist, would you agree or disagree with that statement? In other
I
words,
would hope. Hmm.
yeah, in other words, if I'm acting as a villain, am I accessing the part of me that's a villain? That's my question to you.
Yeah. Well, I think a lot of it is part of that. There's part of themselves. And that's what being a successful actor is bringing you into the character. Um, Even though you're reading a script and reading words written by somebody else, and the characters created by somebody else, you are filling that in with your own interpretation or take on things. And the interesting thing about with actors that maybe some people may not understand or fully grasp is there is a phenomena where a lot of actors can get lost into their character,
Oh yeah, oh yeah,
where the worlds blend, where it becomes like, okay, they almost lose their identity
yeah.
to somewhat. Um,
And not only that, in some cases, they have. Haven't there been actors who have died a certain way in a movie and later on died in real life the same way? I have read examples like that. In other words, those two worlds blend, as you're saying, sometimes in a dramatic way. I mean, we all know
yeah, well,
stories.
I mean,
Yeah, we all know
mhm.
stories of actors and actresses who acted as lovers or couples, and later on became a couple, that kind of thing. That happens
Mhm.
with a certain degree of frequency, I think.
Absolutely. It sure does. So I think, here, what that plays to is like, again, getting lost in character. So let's say an actor plays a dark role, you know, someone who's tortured in on, their character. Sometimes it can mirror them. If we look at what you were brought up, even a case of like Heath Ledger, for instance,
Mm,
the actor Heath Ledger, who played the Dark Knight, back,
mhm.
17, 18 years ago. Brilliant. He did a brilliant job in the performance. I mean, everyone was raving about it, but it was actually the ultimate start of his downfall. Which actually, tragically, he lost his life after not too long after that. And a lot of people were speculating it was really that, even though it was a lot of other issues, that was kind of like the catalyst that set, everything into motion in his life for it to end. Um, so a lot of people can get really deeply affected. Even look at like how Robin Williams was tortured. Now everyone was so, obviously and rightfully so, everyone was shocked and really upset when when the day that they found he took his life. But a lot of people were saying that he was that the actor, not the character Robin Williams was playing, was very lonely and felt like alone. And you would think, well, he's got millions of dollars and has millions of fans, but that wasn't enough and I hear this a lot with other actors too that aren't even as big as he was, that it can be a lonely profession.
Yeah, this idea that, how would a person harm themselves if they have millions of dollars and millions of fans? That idea itself I find fascinating because normally we look at other people and we judge them or what we think they should be feeling according to what we lack or what we like, right? So maybe I don't have any money and I don't have any followers. So then I look at a guy who does have a lot of money and does have a lot of followers, and I say, well, based on my lack, he has what I lack, therefore he must be very happy. But that's just me projecting my own needs or my own lack onto somebody else, right? To a person who already has enough money, I guess. More money doesn't necessarily bring more happiness. There's a lot of research to that end in positive psychology. So, yeah, money makes a difference in happiness levels to a certain amount.
To a
And it's
certain
not that
extent,
it's
yes. Mhm.
Huh? And it's not that it's bad to
No.
have more money. It's just that it doesn't necessarily correlate with more happiness.
Exactly, and it does help, but it doesn't make you. It's not going to help. Like, money's not going to make you intrinsically happy.
Right.
On an intrinsic level, it'll help. Like maybe solve some day to day issues, but it's not going to make you fundamentally happy. And this is why we've seen, Robin Williams or other people. It's not the first time we saw this happen where someone took their life that was wealthy,
Right. Right.
or that. And I've also seen people that were, on the other hand, contrary, that were, below the poverty line and that were incredibly happy.
Correct. So, Dr. Romante, have you done acting yourself? Have you acted yourself professionally?
Yes, yes, I did that's before I became an agent. I did.
What was that like personally for you?
It was fun. Again, I really didn't enjoy being in the spotlight. Um, but what I found was every time I would be on set, I would enjoy it. I would enjoy being around other actors. I would enjoy, being in that environment, that collaborative environment, and working with people. And that, what I really found was how much I really loved working with actors.
That's where
And
you got the idea of becoming an agent, perhaps? No?
yes,
Okay.
yeah, I knew I didn't want to be an actor anymore, but I was like, I don't want to give this up completely. I
Okay.
goes, I love being around actors. So, I did a couple of other stints briefly. I did a little bit of casting. I did a little bit of volunteering at film festivals, even sometimes helping out on sets. And I think what I had the most fun or most fulfilled with was anytime I had interaction with actors.
Okay. So, moving on to the subject of psychology, you are a doctor in psychology, you have a PhD in psychology. So, obviously, you know way more about psychology and psychological processes than us, than other people who haven't gone through that kind of schooling, right? So, I think one of the curiosities that most people have, I have that curiosity, and I think a lot of people that I speak with have the same curiosity, is in recent years, I think you're aware that therapy has become fashionable. In the old days, when I started in this business, therapy was not fashionable. In other words, it was for crazy people. But nowadays, it is fashionable to be in therapy, right? But there's this question. The question that I want to ask you is, does therapy actually help? Is there any data? Is there, and the reason why I ask that is because, I'm a physician as well. And in medicine, we have to study neuroscience, right? And we know that when we discuss a problem over and over, all we're really doing is creating better synaptic connections. We call this learning, right? We create these connections among brain cells, and essentially, we become habituated. So, if I come in to see you every week and I tell you about how unhappy I am, from a neuroscience point of view, it would appear that I would become less happy gradually. How would you tackle this question? Does it help? Does it not help? Is it is it misguided? The notion that talking about a problem could potentially solve the problem. How would you address that?
I think it can be a tricky issue. I definitely think sometimes having an insight about the problem is at least the first step to getting on the route to improvement, like insight. And this is coming from a strict psychoanalytic and Freudian perspective, but I don't think that's also enough. And this is why, like I said earlier in our conversation, how why I become disillusioned with clinical psychology, because I also feel like if someone's in therapy for 8 or 9 years and not really making progress, something's not adding up, and then I often wonder, are we perpetuating,
Yeah,
the
from a brain science point of view, it would appear that we are perpetuating because discussing the same thing over and over only trains us to become more and more like that. So, in other words, if I'm depressed and I come to talk to you and I say, "Look, I'm depressed," and then you ask me, "Okay, how come you feel depressed?" And I tell you all of the bad things that happen in my life, and we go through the process over and over in the illusory search for insight. What I'm actually doing at a brain level is training myself to be even more depressed. And you mentioned NLP a moment ago, neuro linguistic programming. They approach the problem from a very different perspective, as you all know, and hypnotists do as well. So I find it interesting that psychology has become the number one go to science in terms of well being when I'm not sure that we have that much data supporting that. I'm not sure.
yeah. Well, we don't, we don't have that much data around it, and I think what I like about, again, NLP and hypnosis, that it's solution focused. So the goal is to get someone from, you know, from a problem state into a solution state in as much shortest time as possible. Now, I still think traditional psychotherapy is valuable and useful, and definitely should be always in addition, but again, sometimes just talking about it can be doing that can perpetuate the problem. And also, what happens very often, if let's say, I've had years of deciding that someone with depression, for instance. If I'm coming, it becomes part of my identity now. And it becomes almost like, "Hi, I'm Albert. I'm depression," and most people are not ready to give that up. Their identity, and so sometimes people can become almost hooked into their diagnosis or their label,
Yeah, and
and
yeah, sorry, I don't mean to interrupt, but that is so important what Dr. Bramante is explaining. The same thing happens in medicine. The patient will come in and say, "I'm a diabetic," and they own the diagnosis as a huge part of their identity. And there's not even the thought that maybe we can reverse this because they have become that. It isn't just a condition they're living with, it's something that they have become at the identity level. So, very, very important point. I love this explanation, Dr. Bermanti. And I think that this is a point that, I love the way you explained this. So, I just wanted to make that parenthesis. Sorry.
yeah, no, and I'm glad you did because it's really can't be really understood or understood or stated more. It has to be. We have to keep having these conversations because it's very true, and because I often encounter this, and I'm sure you just even as a medical doctor, where some people don't want to really get better, or become healed because it's scary on the other side. Like, okay, you're not gonna maybe, now you have to start taking accountability, and you won't get the special attention that you needed, that you were getting when you were in the deficit or illness state. Whether that's a mental illness or a psychological illness.
Yes.
So, and that's where I think it becomes really important to become aware of is your identity holding you back?
That is such a deep topic, and this is and I think this ties in so well with the whole acting thing because with all due respect, and God knows I have a ton of problems myself. I don't say this in any with any spirit of criticism toward anybody. I mean, people who know me know that I'm a mess, and I'm okay with that. But the point I'm making is some perhaps I'm just thinking aloud, perhaps to a certain degree the ill identity that we all adopt in one way or another is in some way part of our own acting. In other words, am I really that person, or am I really that entity that is that illness, or is that just something that I learned to behave as or to act as? And I struggle with this myself. I mean, I'm not better than anybody else on that. But talking with friends and significant others, it's like when we get that kind of feedback from people who know us really, really well, they go, "Oh, you're really like this." And I'm saying, "No, I'm not like that." But ultimately, we're acting like that, and this is what people are perceiving. So
Hmm.
I think it's fascinating how we take on these identities without necessarily choosing them in a way, and then at some point we begin to believe that that's all we are. And I think that all of us are way more than any of those identities. The challenge is to discover what else we are, right? But I think all of us have way more within than we even are aware of. Would you agree with that? How would you?
Oh no, absolutely. There's a lot more things that we're not aware of too, and this is where like even things that we don't think are necessarily important can be, can be significant as to why we're the way we are, or maybe this event. And sometimes we may not even be consciously aware of maybe this event in our childhood that triggered this behavior or this symptom now. And, it isn't until, again, a person goes through some significant analysis do they realize or that they come to connection with that. Like, okay, this event had triggered that, or this is a reason why I am this way, you know. It, and a lot of times some of the events that may have happened to us in childhood may not seem that significant, but they are, by our mind can interpret it that way. And this could be the reason why a lot of us are walking around with like, feeling inadequate or low self-esteem or imposter syndrome because of, remarks that were told to us when we were children that we're not even remotely aware of that connection right away.
So going back to, yeah, I totally get. I think the way I love the way you explain. By the way, thank you for that explanation, because I think you make it so clear and so easy to understand, and I really appreciate that from you, particularly coming from a man who is an academic, a college professor, and I think that your experience as a professor helps you explain in a way that the student can understand, and I appreciate that. So one thing that I wanted to circle back to is this idea that you help actors overcome their own self limiting beliefs and their self sabotaging behaviors and so forth. But if we could extrapolate that not just to the actors, but to all of us, what would you say is one way to stop doing that? I think you would agree with me that all of us do that. I think all of us sabotage ourselves in one way or another. Maybe economically, maybe in relationships, maybe health wise, whatever. Each one of us would know what area of our lives we could be doing better, but somehow we know that we're not, right? And it's a private thought, but I think we all know that we have an inner knowing of what we could be doing better. So, in this language that we're using here, we're saying that if I could be doing better, but I'm not, the explanation is, well, I'm sabotaging myself. I think that that's a model that we're building here. So, what would you say to all of us is one good way to stop, or to at least start stopping doing that? In other words, how can I stop sabotaging myself? What's the first step?
Um, the first step is awareness, because again, the why sabotage is very sneaky. Is we don't realize we're doing it. It's not like something consciously saying, "Hey, I'm self sabotaging right now." So the first thing is become aware of the link that you are the one that's kind of like, creating this for you, or this chaos, or this hardship. It's not other people. It's you. And I think that's one of the first steps to do that is to, come to that realization that, this is partially, your own doing. So once you become aware of that, then you can start working on saying, okay, what's really going on here? And I often think with self sabotage, one of the common things that's going on is it's a self protective mechanism, fear, for instance. Fear, we often, are protect, self sabotage is really protecting us from fear. Now we may not make that connection right away because our brain, as you know, is wired to protect us, keep us alive, and it does a great job of doing that. And when we were around hundreds of years ago, we were, especially in the caveman Neanderthal days, we had a lot of threats. We had day to day threats. If it came to, whether it was wild animals or other tribes, or illness or even weather. So we had a lot of things that were, not a threat to us now anymore, but that were back then. And our brain had to be vigilant to look out for these threats. And even though we're not now, we don't have those threats, our brain is still acting in the same way. Okay, this is a little bit scary. This is something new. Let me protect. And therefore we start, doing whatever we need to do to protect ourselves.
Yeah, fascinating. I think you started off with the idea of awareness, and what you just explained so well right now. The day I understood that, I can still remember the day I first understood that, and I would like to emphasize what you just explained, because awareness of this one thing alone will change your life. What Dr. Bramante is explaining is that the brain, unbeknownst to us, our brains are designed to protect us and to pick up on the possibility of threats. In other words, the brain is continuously scanning the environment, both external and internal, looking for threats to our survival. This is why when perhaps your belly hurts a little bit, we immediately think, "Oh my gosh, am I dying? What's wrong with me?" That kind of thing. Because the brain is always looking for threats. And you have to accept that in a world as he was describing, in which, the environment is a menace to our survival, animals, tribes competing, whatever. So these kinds of problems become emergencies because it could mean instant
Mhm.
death. So the brain needs to have a mechanism of sounding off every alarm system there is in the body so that we can respond to the perceived threat and potentially increase the possibility of survival. And so we do go into a panic mode multiple times a day. What's important is to recognize that, like he said, awareness. Recognize that most of the time you're not in physical danger. Most of the time you're not dying. Most of the time nobody's trying to kill you. I do realize that for some of us that can happen from time to time, but really the majority of the time that's not true. There is no threat to our physical survival anymore. And so all of these emotional responses which put us in this fight or flight, in this panic mode which doesn't let me
Mhm.
think, right? Most of that
Oh,
stuff,
yeah.
just a thought which you can later disarm, you can discontinue, you can interrupt. Thought interrupting. We have to learn to interrupt the panic so that we can go back to a calm state and design a life that is good for us. How would you rate that? If I were your student, how am I doing so far?
I think you're doing an excellent job.
Ask the professor. I'm just trying to re-articulate what you said because I find that to be, like I said, when the day I understood that, it changed my life. Because we
Mhm.
keep on responding to these ideas as though we're actually in danger, and most of the time we're not. So we got to learn how to turn that off. So this is absolutely fascinating, Dr. Bramante. What are your days like nowadays? What do you do mostly? Are you still teaching, or you're mostly doing the talent agency?
Both. I do kind of both. Like, I still teach part-time on Zoom mainly. So, like, this semester I'm teaching, 3 classes, 2 of those classes are the same, which is psychology, personality, 2 different sections. And then I'm also teaching a class on psychology of death and dying.
Oh, yeah.
So, those are the 3 classes I'm teaching, but most of the time then I'm just working on, the talent agent. That's what I do full time.
So, what's the process like if an actor or actress is listening to us? What is it like to work with you? What does that consist of? How does it? What do you do, or what do they need, or how does it work?
Yeah.
Walk us through it.
Sure. So I work with professional actors. So what you would need would be, an up to date headshot and resume. Um, what that would definitely be important. As well as a demo reel, which is like a collection of your past performances. I would need a most up to date that I would also a lot of training, like technical scene study, acting technique, um, and what an agent does, primarily my goal is to look for gigs and jobs on a day-to-day basis. So I'm really an employment agent. That's my classification. So I'm an employment agent for actors. And so my day-to-day responsibility is to find work for my performers. And the way we make money, and this is how you can tell the legitimate agencies from the ones that are, scams, are is we make money off of a commission. So if you get paid on every job that we book you on or that you booked on throughout the contract, it's 10% commission.
So you don't take a fee up front? Is that what you're
No,
saying?
there should never be an upfront freight.
Oh,
Um,
listen to Dr. Bermanti, folks. If you are an actor and actress, and if you are engaging with a talent agent of some type, remember what he just said. There shouldn't be an upfront fee. Okay, that's important. I didn't know that.
yeah, and we only make money when you make money at the end. So we don't get paid until you're paid. So that's the rule. So the standard 10%. So it's 10% of the salary for every job.
Okay. And do you include some type of counseling? Because we were talking earlier about sabotage. Do you, or
Yeah,
is that a separate package?
no, I don't. I mean, unofficially, for some people, I'll do that for free. I mean, obviously, I'm not gonna charge. That's not gonna be required. Um, but not every actor is open to that. And one thing I want to respect is boundaries. In doing this. So if they employ me to if they contract me to be their agent, then that's all I'm going to be. Now, if they need extra support, I will gladly provide that. But I would
Understood.
never step on or infringe on by saying, "Okay, let me coach you," when if they never asked for it.
Yeah, I understand. Yeah, that's fascinating. I got you. Yeah, that's beautiful. So, folks, if you're listening to us and if you like, can you do you work with entry level or beginners, or do you only work with more seasoned actors? Or
It's better to have um, some experience already. Um, it's better. I don't really necessarily work with entry level, but I can certainly answer questions. Be open to answering any questions if you're entry level and you want to open up
and
and reach out. I'll definitely be happy to point you in certain directions or give you any feedback.
And do you provide any? You explained already that if somebody hires you for the agency model, you don't step the boundary. But if somebody called you up and says, "Look, I want some coaching to break into the industry," do you provide that as a service?
Yes, yeah.
Okay. So this is really awesome, folks. You're listening to the man himself. He can coach you professionally on how to become an actor or an actress. He can actually coach you, he can actually show you, he can actually walk through the process with you so that you can develop your career in acting if that's what you want to do. His name is Dr. Albert Bramante. Where can we find you?
So you can go to my website, albertbramante.com. You can also go to bramanteartist.com. I have, my agency website is Bramante Artist. Feel free to reach out and say, that you this podcast, and I'd be happy to, have any conversation with you.
This is actually really awesome. I'm going to put all the links in the show notes, of course, as you're listening to us. You're going to have all these links below the episode so you can access him. But, folks, take a moment to think about how awesome this is. Here's a college professor, doctor in psychology. Think about that, who can help you become an actor. Think about that for a second. And he can do both sides of the coin. He can both coach you as a service, he can help you overcome your own limitations, and he can coach you on a career path. And as a talent agent, he can employ you basically. He can work with you to employ you to get you gigs, as he said. So here you have a one stop person that can help you with all kinds of things if you're interested in acting or if you're interested in psychology. Dr. Bramante, what about conventional therapy? Do you do any of that?
Yes, a little bit. I mainly on the NLP side, and coaching. I really consider it more of a performance mindset coaching. Um, where I integrate hypnosis and NLP.
Well, this is fascinating. This is a wealth of knowledge and experience and potential for all of you. I'm curious. I want to talk to you more off the air and learn some more and grow some more. But folks, if you're listening to us, check this out. You can also reach out to him for some form of therapy, discuss it with him, whatever the modality that works best. But he's not only academic psychologist, but also well versed in the less traditional modalities or the more complementary modalities of NLP and hypnosis. So here you have a man that has a breadth of knowledge that is just unbelievable and can help you be a better person, be happier, overcome the obstacles that hold you back. And particularly if you're interested in acting, he can help you grow in that profession. I think this is a fabulous resource, a fabulous contact to have on your phone and reach out to him and talk to him to see if you guys can work together. I think this is fascinating. Dr. Bramante, I absolutely loved speaking with you, but there's more to discuss, and I'm wondering if we can count on you to come back. We would love to have you back and explore other topics that we didn't have a chance to get into. Could we count on you to come back in a few weeks
Uh,
and discuss some more?
one 100%, just reach out and I'll be happy to come on again.
There you have it, folks, from the man himself. He's going to come back, and this way you can post your questions, and we can explore more topics and get into deeper conversations. I absolutely love talking with you. I thank you so much for sharing with us your expertise, your knowledge, your awareness. Thank you so much for your time, and thank you for blessing us with your wisdom. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me.
Do you have any parting thought? Do you have any idea that you want to leave us with?
I would just wanna say that you have all the answers that you need within you, and sometimes you may just need the wisdom of a coach, a therapist to help you tap in to that inner wisdom.
There you have it, folks. Dr. Albert Bramante, PhD in psychology. What an awesome conversation. Talent agent for actors and actresses, and a doctor in psychology. Thank you so much for your contribution. Talk soon.
Thank you.